So, now I will show you the assembly of the flower itself. Shamrocks, not separated petals, but they're precisely connected together, and two-leaved double petal. How are we going to collect them if you have such veiners and such cutters? Everything is elementary. Look, first we take the white petals, the side ones. We make a small hole in the middle with a stack or something sharp at the very center, so that the petals are evenly located at the very center. We do it at the shamrock. In the middle we find the center and make a hole. Now, look. First we will attach the side petals. We put it on the wire. Let's use super glue. Here we coat carefully. I will show you now. Here we apply the petals carefully so that they look evenly. They need to be correctly positioned. Press gently. We glue. Hold for a few seconds. That's all. Now, the next thing we do, we put the shamrock on the wire through the hole. Also, we paint over the base of the side petals here. You can grease the wire with glue. And we dress neatly. We look to ensure that the petals are located correctly. Press gently. We hold on to the beak and hold the petals on the back side so that they hold together well. Glued well. That's all. Here's what happened. Look. This is the simplest assembly. The petals are no longer glued separately, but glued together. Front and side view. Here is an assembly option. It depends on what kind of veiners you have. Either those that are individually glued to the petals, as I showed you, of these, for example, double petals, and triple petals of the lateral, lower, and upper petals. Here. Start from this and collect the petals assembly itself, as it will be more convenient for you. That's all. The next step is toning. Let's start toning, but first we will start toning the very first flowers that are closest to the buds. They will be lightly colored. That is, the blue orchid alive. The petals which are closer to the orchid are lightly colored. The more intense colors follow, and then the flowers follow the stem. They have a more pronounced color. We will do the same. We will try to match the color of a living orchid. For this, we will do a very weak toning. Let's get started. Look, first, what have I done? I took 3 marks of soft pastels and already rubbed this pastel separately so that it lay down with a more intense color. And what shades do I have? Blue, blue, turquoise. Then a blue tint and a dark blue. Therefore, I will combine colors to get smooth transitions and a more intense color. So let's start first by toning the petals. Look at the very first colors that supposed only opened, that are closer to the bud. Toning starts mostly at the edge of the petals. We'll start with the top petal. I will use a wide brush. It is more convenient for me to use a wide brush. It is possible, of course, with a narrower, but more evenly lays down with a wider brush. It is the color. See what we are doing? We apply pastel with such hammering movements. First at the base, at the very edge of the petal. First I apply blue, that is, slightly. We will not omit the color for the entire petal. We will stop there. I will not go further. Upper petal. The same thing we do with the side lobes. So we mainly paint only on the sides. A little touching. First, let's go in blue, and then we focus on a more saturated, darker shade. First, let's make a smooth color transition here. So, like this. And the lower petals, we also tint the tips and go a little towards the middle. The transition is smooth. So, here and here. Again, it is taught that the petal is not completely colored. Slightly, maybe with the edge of the brush, go through and make these smooth transitions. Here's what happened so far. What else do I want to do? Look, since the texture is precisely expressed, it is mainly in the center of the petal. All the streaks are beautiful. What can be done before, then we process with the intense shade. The brush will be wet on a napkin so that it is not very stained. And you can walk along the petal with such smooth movements. See what happens? The brush only paints the veins on the petal. Veins are captured. So, here and here. Now I will make it more intense. We touch on the central veins. At the same time, the petal itself will look very beautiful. Look. Let's grab a little bit here. All the same, it remains quite light, little colored, but at the same time veins stand out as happens in live flowers. So that's what happens. Look. Now what do we need to do? Apply blue for a more saturated color first here. Experiment. What is the best thing to do? It is better to take a picture or put a phone in front of you with a photo of a living flower, the same blue orchid, and see how its color is located. The color of a living flower, and at the same time try to repeat this color. Unfortunately, I have no pictures right now. I cannot show you. I didn't do it, and I do it from memory because I saw in the photo how the flowers are arranged, what the color of flowers looks like. Therefore, I show you. You look, repeat after me, or you can repeat from a photograph of a living flower. If I have a flower of the same color at home, then fine, you can try the quick copy. Here now we will apply the shade more intensively. So look what happens. See what else we can do. We take a more saturated color, blue, darker. It is advisable, look, since everything is in this color, birch blue, this is such a blue aquamarine. I mix them like this. I add a little light blue shades to the blue, so that it is still not violet blue. I need shades of blue. Therefore, I made it more saturated, and you can still go over the blue a little with a blue tint. At the same time, we make the emphasis more intense. So, it's the same on the other side. I will have a smooth transition from a light turquoise, blue hue to a more saturated blue. So now, you see I blow it off periodically because the pastel pours out a little so that it doesn't crumble or blow off neatly. It is better not to shake off, but simply to blow off. It's very easy to clean. So, now here we're going to color a little. On this side, the lower petals, we will do here the same thing. So this is what happens, look. Here's a flower. So next, what are we going to do? Look, this color in principle suits me. The only thing I want to add small spots. Because the color of a flower, when it starts to bloom, it's always light, and then when the petals, are still collected in a bud, when the flower opens completely, color is obtained. The flower is completely colored, and I want to add more shades. I will add a little after all. I will make a couple of spots like a living flower. Here I just take with such light strokes. I just apply here without touching the edge of the petal. The effect will be interesting. Look. Again, like a living flower. So, a little more intense color, saturated on this side and on the other side of the petal. Let's a little here. At the very edge, let's apply a little here. You see how I apply a little shade with such patting movements. I shade slightly so that it lays down evenly. And you can apply a little at the bottom. Make a small spot here. Now we will apply. We do not completely color the petal. It should be very light. That is, the flower itself. These are the lightest flowers that we will have on a branch, those that are at the very beginning. And let's highlight the veins with a slight lighter color so that it is clearly visible. Again, I clean the brush well on a napkin so that it does not apply sharp strokes. Here it turns out more pronounced. Look, I think it's noticeable. Pronounced streaks are obtained. With light, pressing movements, I walk along the veins like this. That's all. It can be shaded. Here's what happens. Here is the color. I hope you like this color scheme because you can experiment. You can apply more spots here, for example light ones. Or apply a bluer stain here. Leave it lighter here and here a bluer spot is. Try the same, because each orchid of each flower has an individual color. So just try and experiment with color. The more unusual the colors, the more imagination you show, the better it will be. It will look more lively. Now what are we going to do? Now we will hold the flower over the stem. This is in order to fix the pastel so that it does not stain the fingers, does not crumble. It will be enough to hold a little over the stem. Or, of course, a more correct way is to fix the pastel. There are special means, fixatives, in the form of a spray. It fixes pastels very well. Apply and everything will adhere perfectly. If you do not have a fixative or you did not have time to buy it, a great option, a very good alternative is to hold it over the stem. We are doing. Put either a pot on the stove or a kettle, whatever. The water boils over a very intense steam at a distance of 15-20 centimeters. Look at the intensity of the steam. Hold the flower like this for 2-3 seconds. We held it. It is enough. Look, the petals are slightly moistened so that there are no drops on the flower. Remove and set aside to dry. It dries very quickly while the pastel is fixed. Everything will hold up perfectly. Look, do not overexpose over the steam, so that there are no extra drops, smudges, so that the pastels are not smeared. That's it. 2-3 seconds above the steam at a distance of 15-20 centimeters. That's it. Now I'll show you how we will tint more saturated color, those flowers that will be located further on the branch. So, and now we will tint the flower, which will be located further along the branch, and it will be more saturated, more intense color. So, where do I want to start? Let's first immediately express the veins, make them more expressive. Let's start with the veins. To do this, I'll first make it blue. Again, we take the pastel, blot it on a napkin, remove excess. Carefully, at first I go through smooth movements at the top. What happens then? The veins are highlighted, but the color is not applied. Here, look what happens. They turned out beautiful. On the other lobe, we do the same thing. Now I'll take more color. So, I press gently with a brush. Hold the petal on the back, in order not to break it. So, the veins stand out. See how interesting it turns out. The same thing we'll do on the upper petal and the bottom ones. We'll try the lower ones now. It's not really visible, but we are the edge of the flower. Let's scroll a little inside the petal with a brush. And now the same thing on the other hand. Here and inside. So, here's what happens, look. The veins are highlighted. I think it can be seen well. So now we apply the main color. Let's start with the blue color as we have a smooth transition from light blue to a more intense dark color. We apply the color carefully with patty movements, hammering in the correct word. Here in principle, the entire top petal can be completely colored. We grab the top of the petal between petals, where we crawl up carefully. You can paint inside, where you can see between the petals. We paint near the beak, this place. So now we apply the shade. See how we are going to color. It will apply color densely, intensively, but we will leave a little gaps. The petal will not be completely colored. We still need to leave whiter spots somewhere, lighter shades. Again, with a swiping motion, I apply color to the top of the petal. We will leave the middle almost unpainted. Blow off. See what happens. I turn the flower on the other side, now from the bottom of the petal. I apply color with patty movements, driving in. So, here the edge of the petal remains unpainted. This transition is also interesting. So look what happens. The center of the petal is practically uncolored, with a more saturated hue at the edge. Now I'm going to walk here. So now, too, most are doing on the other side. But here you can do the opposite. we paint closer to the base of the petal and apply a denser color. Again with the same driving movements. We leave the edge of the petal lighter. That is the shade. It is not applied perfectly evenly, or rather equally on both sides. The color of the petals is still different in the living blue orchid. It is applied in completely different ways. One petal may have a more intense color on one side and a more saturated shade on the other petal on the other. Therefore, we are trying to repeat the same thing. See, there is a richer color here. Here the middle is not painted. It is painted here. We leave the edge of the flower, the petal, unpainted. Here we paint. Now I will type in more color. If you are looking, why do we apply paint with a hammering motion? I take more pastels on the brush and apply with patting movements. Why? Because this way the color lays down more intensely and at the same time lays down more saturated color. If you will apply with strokes, then the pastel can lie in a very light shade, transparent. The color intensity and velvety of the petals are important. Therefore, we apply with patting movements. After we apply the first color, the first layer of tinting, we will hold over the steam. And then we will apply the second layer. That is, we will have a phased toning. So let's start toning the lower part petals. Coloring here. Here's a little bit inside. Look, in principle, we will also walk a little inside with a brush so that the color is uniform. You can finish painting the petals before assembly, but I like it after assembly. We roll to the petal the beak with clay. If the tinting was applied before the flower is assembled, then it is very difficult to apply a roll-in order to remove the joints between the beak and the petals without affecting the tinting. The mud can be. Therefore, we first collect the flower and then we apply the tint. Therefore, it is better to crawl inside with a brush once again, tint the lower petals, try to do this carefully, then apply in advance and then collect. There are some nuances here. Look. So, here's what happened. Now girls, we're going to hold this flower over the steam. We hold over the steam for 2 seconds, just a little so that the first layer grabs, fixes. We held it over the steam for 2-3 seconds. Then we will apply tint again, only with darker shades. We will mix it with blue ones and see what happens. I went to keep it over the steam. You are doing the same. After you have held the flower over the steam, we will continue toning the more intense shades. Now I will move a little. What do? We will apply a darker color, blue. I will mix it with blue so that it is not so obviously blue-violet. So let's start with the little top petal. See why we are doing this in stages? Why do we first hold over the steam and then apply tint again? Because the pastel, the first layer that we apply, is not fixed and the pastel does not lie so tightly on the petals. To apply darker shades and express the color more, so that the dark blue color can lie on the blue, this requires a preliminary fixation of the pastel. If we applied the blue on the light blue without fixing pastels, it would not lie down and the color will not be so pronounced. At first, we held it for a little over the steam, and now we apply, and it is applied much better in the sense that the color will lay down more evenly. and more intensely. So now we apply the color blue to the side petals. See what happens. We do not paint the entire petal completely where we applied blue, but we apply it in such a way as to create a transition from light blue to blue. Let's see what happens. To have a cool, beautiful transition interesting. So, here you can tint the middle with light blue, tint with a darker color, thus. So now we tint the lower part of the right petal with dark blue. Again, the edge of the petal can be left out to make a more beautiful transition. So let's see what happens. Look, this is an interesting shade. Now leave some blue here. Basically, you can do it here in 3 steps. You can hold it over the steam again, and if we want to express it with an even darker color, then after you have held it over the steam, apply but just a blue tint, just slightly with the edge of the brush. But now we will try it. Now I see if I like toning, then I leave it. If I want to add a little more accents, I will hold it over the steam and again apply pastels in more intense dark shades. Because all these are flowers, extremely should be darker in color, more intensely colored. So now from this side. Very neat. Patty movements, hammering in. Not rubbing. Just like that. Because when you rub in, the effect will be slightly different. So, now the lower petals. We can focus on the inner edge of the petal and on the middle, for example. Right here. Look. Let's say that the outer part of the petal is left slightly colored. Give a more intense shade to the inner part. I blow it off periodically. You see, I do this because the pastel can lie down in grains so that there is no such thing. And yet, if you are sensitive, if you are allergic to pollen or dust, or even have a tendency to allergies, then it is best to carry out toning in a gauze bandage. Why is this done? To protect your airways, to keep the area well ventilated. Open a window so that the pastels don't fly too much. It is quite volatile. Better to wear a bandage over your face. And then it will be safe and everything is fine. Here, look, this is the shade. I want even deeper blue transitions. To do this, I will also support over the steam and then add a little edge. See what happens. Now again, we hold over the steam for 2-3 seconds and another third stage of applying pastels. The effect will be even more interesting. I held a flower over the steam. What are we doing now? I take a dark blue color with the very tip of the brush and gently make a spot along the very edge. I apply. I blow it off again. A more saturated color lays down. You can probably use another brush now. I'm going to try now. So, with a narrower, softer brush, apply richer accents. I think that you can see this on camera too, because when we apply the third layer of pastel, the shade lays down with a more intense color and more saturated. I'll walk a little here. Look, we're making the color spots darker already. That is, at first there was a light blue color, then it turns into dark blue, and now against this background with dark blue we make even darker spots. We make the transition from very light to very dark. Look, there is an accent. So you can add just a little bit here. Since the spots are like that, the colors are completely different. I blend a smooth transition. The transition from dark to light. Now we take another petal. Same thing to do with this hand. I put or render a darker shade. Intense blue. Everything is clearly visible here. So further from below, here is the same thing. You can basically do it in 2 steps. You don't have to bother like me. But if you want just such an interesting color, a smooth transition with a shade, then you can safely do it in 3 stages even. Fix the pastel, apply the pastel again, the shades that suits you in color. See what happens. Now we will also focus on the upper petal here. So you can leave. And the bottom ones. The same thing. Of course, the huge success, the greatest success in creating orchid flowers depends on the toning. If colored flowers that are colored are not easy white, then of course a huge factor affecting the realism, the beauty of flower is toning. What else do I want to do? After toning, the streaks were slightly smeared. Now you can take such a dark color, brush off the brush well, and try to walk again. Highlight the veins. And from this side, the same thing. That's all. This completes the toning. We will not apply saturated shades anymore. Now it is enough to hold again over the steam for 2-3 seconds to fix the last layer of pastel, and that's it. We do not touch the flowers anymore. We will only refine them. That's it. Then I will show you the toning of the buds. How we will tone the buds.